So lately it's been a bit quiet on my channel, and that's because we had the JLPT yesterday on the 6th of July. And in this video I want to talk about my experience taking my first JLPT test ever, um, how I prepared, how the test exam difficulty level was, which kind of test parts you have, and so on and so on. So if you're curious about taking the JLPT, or maybe if you took the JLPT, I think this video could be a nice benefit for you. So let's get started. I basically prepared for the JLPT N2 test. I already wanted to take it when I was back in Japan the last December, but somehow I wasn't able to register for the JLPT because I was abroad. That's why it was a bit late for me to take the JLPT this July, because you can just take it on July or on December. And I basically took the Shinkansen Master books. Here you see the kanji version. And I did all books except the grammar one. I can tell you from the JLPT and 2 level, if you use the Shinkansen Master books, you will have the most basic knowledge. So one thing I thought is, if I know books, then it will be already easy for me to do the JLPT test. But I did some exams, some past JLPT exams, and I kind of recognized that I'm kind of missing a lot of information. And that is the first information that I want to give you about the JLPT. Basically, a JLPT, in my side or in my opinion, is not an exam that aims for many people to get 100% or 90% of the points. You can just look at this graph. I will put it here somewhere. I researched it in the internet, and you see that the most people will be, I think, if we look at the graph, correct me if it's not right, but you will see it here, will be around 100 points out of 180 points. Or 110, 120, and so on. And you can see that really not getting any points in the JLPT test is really nearly impossible. Getting the top points in the JLPT is already nearly possible, but of course there's some people that clinch it. In my case, I will know how much points I got when the results come out in a month. It's kind of hilarious, because you have to imagine you have a question book, and there you have questions, about 7 questions, and then you have 4 answer possibilities. And then you have an answer sheet, and in the answer sheet you need to put a black dot, the answer you think. So for example, question 1, and then you say, is it 1, 2, 3, or 4 of things that I can choose? And then you just put a black dot, and they have machines that read it, but they still need 3 months to process it. I don't know. But anyway, before we go too much into the details of the JLPT, let's just first talk how the JLPT exam functions. So basically, in general, the JLPT test consists of a basic understanding part, a reading part, and a listening part. First 105 minutes of the exam, so 1 hour and 45 minutes, the part where you will have questions about general understanding. So for example, those are questions that are related to grammar, the reading of some kanji, and also which vocabulary you use in which situation. In which situation those 4 vocabularies is the right one to use. What makes the most sense. This is the first part of the exam. At those first 105 minutes, you also have the reading part. The reading part, basically, you will just have, in 2 at least, you have business emails, or what else did we have? We had some text from some researchers, for example, or we had some text from some books. And then you will have some questions about those texts. For example, there's some underlined part, and they will ask you, what do they mean with this? For example, there's something that says, それは大変ですね. And then they will ask you, what do they mean with それは大変ですね? And then you will have a short break. We had a break of about 30 minutes where we had to leave the room. And then we had the listening part for about 50 minutes. And the listening part basically consists of 3 parts. I think we had 5 like question types and inside those question types you had many like smaller questions. But in my opinion, it was just about 3 basic question types. So the first one was, you will have someone talking, and then you will have a question. For example, they're talking about their vacation, and then they're asking you, okay, where do they want to go? Second question type is, will have person talking, and then you need to find the right answer for this. So they will give you 3 options where you have to choose from. So for example, if someone says, 昨日まだ残業してた, then you will have the answer of maybe, いいですね. Second one would be, それは大変ですね. The third one would be, お腹すいた? I don't know. For me, if you understood what I just said, it's sometimes so hilarious because you just hear some answers and you're like, okay, I think this is wrong. And you have to find out the one that fits to the thing that the person said before. And basically, the last part, you will have a really long text, really long talk, about 1-3 minutes. And I would advise you to do some memos, some notes, and then they will ask you in the next one, okay, what did they say? What do they want to do? And so on and so on. That is the general exam. So the exam itself just takes 155 minutes. Like I said, you have 3 parts: an understanding part with grammar and vocabulary related questions, a reading part where you have to read, the listening part where you have to listen. And if you want to pass the JLPT, and that's how we get back to the beginning, because usually you write an exam, at least in my case, I expect that it is kind of easier to get in the higher grade levels, but the JLPT itself just wants you to get at least 30% of the points per per subject. In this case, you need to have 30% of the points in the understanding part. You need to have 30% of the points in the reading part, and you need to have at least 30% of the points in the listening. And if you get every points together, you should have at least 50% of the points in the exam to pass. So if we translate it, 180 points, at least in the N2, you need at least 90 pass. The pass rate is usually about 40% here. You have at least 19 points in understanding, 19 points in reading, and 20 points in listening. That is what you need to pass the test. And if you think about it, it's not that hard if you think for it percentage-wise, but now I want to talk about my experience of the JLPT test. First, problems I encountered. So if you will ever write a JLPT test, you will not run into the same problems as I did. Maybe some things that I think I did pretty good, because some parts in the exam were pretty easy for me. I will also talk, before I talk about those 2 parts, I will also want to show you how the exam actually looks. Because before the exam happened, I didn't really know what will happen at the exam, and this always puts some kind of stress for me. So let me take the stress away from you, tell you how does it like to take part in the test. So at least here in Germany, in Düsseldorf, we got sent a test voucher. So basically, the voucher we got sent is kind of like this one. You know, you have an examine number, a picture, and stuff like this. And the voucher is pretty important because it is kind of an identification number to know who you are. So if you go to the test site, you need this voucher, an ID to, okay, I'm the person on this voucher. And then, of course, you need something to write. And something that pretty, say, interesting for me was that they told us we need a certain strength pencil. So if you have pencils, you have certain strengths, like 2B, B, HB, stuff like this, at least here in Germany. And they told us you need at least HB or 2B. And I was like, okay. And when I entered the room, I was asking the person, and they told you need certain strengths of pencils. So I went to buy this pencil and I went to the test site. So there it says from 12:50, the test, you can enter the room. The test will start at 13:50. And in our case, it was at the university building. So we went to the university. We entered the building, they checked our test voucher, and then they told us, okay, everyone had their designated seat. So I was number 128, and they told me, okay, you're number 128, you need to sit here. And I was asking the lady there that, yeah, I don't know, I bought this pencil, but I usually take the other pencil. So usually when I write an exam, use this kind of pencil, because I don't know, it's just easier for me to use this one. And I asked her, can I use it? And she was like, yeah, it's okay. So at least in our test site, they're not that strict with what you use, as long as you use a pencil. Because you cannot use other, like a normal pen is not allowed, because they say their machines cannot really read it. You need a pencil. And then, of course, some kind of, no, what's called in English, but to erase, did some mistakes. Then basically you sit there and they will read you all the rules and everything that's not that important. Then they will do a sound test to check if everyone can hear properly what the speakers are saying. And I would really advise you, if you have a problem with the sound or anything, you tell them, I cannot hear that good. Or maybe, I don't know, I knew, for example, at my university, there was a person who couldn't hear on their right ear. So when we had our Japanese exams, she was always sit on the right side so she could hear with her left ear. These are, for example, some things that you can also ask them. Anyway, they will explain you pretty much in detail what you have to do. So don't be too scared. In the test, they will also tell you pretty much in detail what will happen, how it looks like. So you usually have a question book. The first one was about 33 pages, which was kind of a lot to say. And next to the question book, you have like a paper sheet. So you can imagine you have a sheet, and where you input your the number or your answers, and then you have a question book where you read the questions and see the answers. And this is basically a pretty Japanese style exam. I don't know, in Germany we don't have kind of exam, but in Japan, even at the university where I was, we had the same system. And then the exam was beginning. And we had about 105 minutes, and I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And the first part was just like I don't remember it exactly, but you have either there were kanji or there were hiragana to find the word that has this reading. So for example, I remember there was the for hayu, and then you had some examples like hayu, hayu, heiyu, and haiyo, for example, and then you have to choose the right reading. And this you do basically pretty long time. Then you will have some parts where 4 different vocabularies and you need to input the right vocabulary. Another question type, for example, was that you needed to you have a vocabulary underlined. You need to find the fitting word. So for example, one was myo, myona, something. And we had some certain things that we could cross that similar meaning. In this case, what is similar to myo, so I said figi. So it is also important, if you learn Japanese, also learn how to which words are similar. And that is interesting because I always learned how those words are similar. So I learned what is the difference between myo and figi, when do you use it, and that it's important. But for the JLPT, it's actually useless information. As long as you know that those 2 words are kind of similar, you can pass this question time. So one thing I was also struggling with when I was learning Japanese, often when I read texts, I knew what the kanji were, what the meaning was, but sometimes I didn't really know the reading that perfectly. So I kind of fixed that because in the last month before the JLPT, I repeated everything and tried to get that information. It was because that was the reason why I wasn't struggling with it in the exam. But I can really emphasize on this one, should know how to really write them. It is not like that there's some really different things written down. So sometimes it's just I don't know, like in the case of Hayu. So sometimes it is without the E. Sometimes it is, if you have a shoe, then maybe sometimes it's shoe, sometimes it's shoe, and sometimes it's sho, sho. So you have really similar examples that you need to kind of distinguish. So I would advise you to really learn how to read it. Or one other thing that is good, if you are really good at speaking, you can just speak the word in your head, then think about it. Okay, which one could it be? In my case, I didn't really have a problem with the part. Then there were some other questions. Told you the one that we need similar words. I was pretty good at this one too. Then there were some questions, put the right vocabulary. I didn't have problems with this too. Of course, sometimes there were some vocabularies that I never saw in my life. I just had to guess. This was like 3 times. And I knew the kanji, so I could kind of guess what it could be. And yeah, that is maybe a good part to come back to those books. Because if I just use the information from these books here, I think it is enough to barely pass the JLPT N2. So in my latest videos, I also always told you if you want to pass the JLPT, just use the Shinkansen Master. But I have to correct myself here, because now in my own experience, I see that if you want to pass the JLPT, you need to consume much Japanese media, at least for the JLPT N2. So, and that was the thing. The book helped me pretty much to understand many vocabularies and stuff like this. But so many vocabularies that weren't even mentioned in this N2 book came up in this exam, also in the beginning sections. So there I would like advise you to not just use the books, use it as a basic foundation, but then also try to consume Japanese literature, for example. Read some books, some blog posts, watch some Netflix series, consume things that Japanese native people would also consume. For example, also don't just learn the JLPT kanji lists, use the Joyo kanji lists, for example. So for JLPT N2, I would highly advise you to, like I said, some daily Japanese media or just read some news articles. Because they will not fully prepare you for JLPT. Maybe with this knowledge you'll be able to pass, but to really have a good grade and to really pass more securely, I advise you to do something there. That was what I was basically doing. So I was also reading some books. For example, one book I was reading was Sekai de Ichiban Nagai Shashin. Was one. Then some books that I linked to you in the past videos, like the short stories books I really like. I can really recommend. Yeah, were like some books that I was using. But now we come to the part. Because the first part was pretty good, and I was like, wait, this exam is actually going better than I expected. I was pretty happy until I saw the reading parts. This is the problem that I encountered and the mistake that I was doing when learning. I was always, in my whole Japanese learning career, I was always avoiding to read Japanese. I don't know. I was never the type of guy to read that many books. I was never the type of guy to really like reading Japanese. I'm more like a talkative person. So if I use Japanese, I always wanted to talk to people, and that is the main usage that I have when doing Japanese. And there in this exam, first I saw I like two important skills reading section. So like I told you before, I was reading a book or like a few books, but it wasn't enough that I was reading. I should have read way, way more. So how can you distinguish if you read enough or if you have enough reading skills? Basically, this way. So, like I told you before, you have 30 pages or 1 hour 45. If you just take the last 15 minutes as some backup, imagine you have 1.5 hours for 33 pages, or let's say minutes per page. And first part of the JLPT exam took me about 20 or 30 minutes. So let's just say you have like 20 pages left for 1 hour. So like I said, you have 3 or 4 minutes for those texts. That is the thing. Need to read the whole text. You need to understand the text. Then you need to answer the questions. Of course, sometimes you have reading text that will ask you some specific question where you don't have to read the whole text. Usually, one thing that I was lacking is reading speed. So that my reading speed was way too slow. And not just the reading speed, understanding the whole context of this written, or also understanding where the main point of this text is hidden. And this kind of skill to read a text and to kind of understand by feeling where is the most important information, or which kind of things indicate which information. If I would have more time, I wouldn't also be able to. But you really need to do it in a fast. You have enough time to read the text one time, then you look at the question, then you find the information, and then it's already like over, and you need to go to the next text. And I was in such a hurry in all those texts that I was kind of overwhelmed by all the information that I had to do. And that was why my reading part was not that good. I still managed to pass this part, but I was kind of shocked at the pace I had JLPT exam. Like I said, really advise you to just read many things. You don't need to think too much about some certain techniques that you need. If you just regularly read written texts, then it will just come automated. Then it will just come by itself how you should read them. So this is something I can really advise you. And of course, for me also, when I'm alone in my room at home, it is way easier to do Japanese exercises than when I'm in a room with 100 other people and windows are open, the people there are always walking around you, and outside you can hear some music because it's next to the main train station. So that did make things easier for me. Anyway, I managed to do it in time, but I'm not happy with how the reading sections went. But I mean, that's okay. And yeah, this is basically the first part. Then they will tell you that, okay, it's over. Also, I read in the internet that sometimes they cover the clocks. In my case, they didn't cover the clock. They, you could always see the time. So I have like a digital clock like this. So you're not allowed to use this one. It's like a smartwatch. You're not allowed to use it. And you're just allowed to take an analog clock. So I would always advise you, if you have some friend or if you have some at home, take it with you. It is really beneficial to know about the time in the JLPT, kind of know, okay, I'm in time, I'm on time. Okay, I just had to delete some my SD card because it was getting full. Anyway, um, yeah, that was about the reading section. And then at part, we were told we have to leave the room. This was something that I couldn't really understand and that I have to really criticize with the JLPT. They told you have 30 minutes, you need to leave the room. And then you need to be back at 40 past 1, I think it was. 40 past 2, something like this. But she said 40 past. But the problem is that there are no clocks in the whole building. No one knows the time because not everyone nowadays has a normal analog watch, right? For example, I have the smartwatch, I cannot take it. I didn't take it to the exam. And even if you take it to the exam, at the beginning you get some kind of pouch, kind of like this one, but red. And there you have to phone and everything digital that you have. Also, if something starts to ring, then you will be qualified. And so everything was in this bag. They said, okay, you have 30 minutes break and then you need to come back. And I was standing outside there and was like, should I count the seconds or what should I do? Because I don't know when to go back inside. So I was just looking in the crowd. There's a person, the watch on their arm. Like looking and looking and looking. And I saw, this one is a watch. And always I was kind of like standing there eating my breath. And then always kind of looking like this to the person. I think till this day, this person thinks like, why the fuck was he always looking at me? Or excuse me, but he was like thinking like, why was he always looking at me? If that person sees this video, that was the reason. Anyway, that is at least my survival trick for if you don't have a clock, because no one comes outside. They expect you to be there at a certain time, even though you don't have something that shows you the time. So what happened was, I was looking at this person. I saw that person was going inside, so I was like, okay, it's time to go inside. I went inside too, but some other people didn't stand in front of the hallway. They went somewhere else, to the toilet or somewhere. In this case, 5 people didn't come on time to the exam and they were disqualified. Because if they start to play the CD, then you're not allowed to enter the room, therefore you're disqualified. And I think that's something you can take. A person can come outside and tell the people, okay, it's 30 past, in 10 minutes we will start. So at least that people in front of the room know that they can go inside. But anyway, then we went inside, the listening section started. Like I told you before, you don't have that much time to at the listening parts. Also, they will just say the listening things one time. You just have one time to listen to it, and then you need to choose the answer. And I have a really good trick for you. Because you have all the pages, you already know every answer possibilities that you will have, that you will choose from. You just don't know what they will say. But they will have a part where they will have an example that to kind of show you how this listening section will work. Internet, there are already some. I will also make a video there where I will make it pretty similar to the JLPT listening section, so you can prepare for it. But I will also make a video in the future you to kind of mimic that listening section so you can prepare for it. But anyway, you already know how the listening section will be. Usually it's something like you hear a question, then you hear the dialogue, you hear the question again, and then you have to answer. What I was doing is, in the time where they set the example, for example, you had the first block and they explained like reichi, like the first example, and then you have maybe like 4 or 5 exercises. So there I was just looking at the exercises, taking my pen, looking at every possible answer, and kind of trying to find out from the answers which kind of dialogue will happen. So for example, there was a certain question type where they said something like, I don't know exactly what was written there, but you had something ABCD kara, ABCD kara, EF kara. So there was some reasons why a person's doing something. So I was kind of picking out, okay, okashi ga suki. So I was marking the okashi. And then there was a second one with mina yorokonde hoshii. I was marking the yorokonde, and so on. So just by looking at this part really fast, marking the main vocabulary of that answer type to find out what is this answer, I could also see, okay, they will kind of talk about the reason why that person is doing something. And then I was just marking one word for every answer possibility. And for the whole question, I was kind of writing something in German next to it, like the reason question, or I don't know, there was something else where they ask what the person will do next. So I was just like writing down next. So when I will come to that answer type later, I will kind of know, it will be kind of like this. And this was really helpful, for me at least. And also you have enough time because that example is pretty long. I mean, you just need to mark out certain keywords. So when the question started, I already kind of knew what they will talk about, or at least what I need to look for, because listening to it, then having like 5 seconds to choose your answer, and then going to the next one was a bit fast for me, to be honest. So I was doing it kind of like this. And I did it for the first block, the second, the third, fourth, the fifth. I did it for every block. Yeah. Then those are the first two parts. Then the third part will be similar to part 1 and 2, but you cannot see the answer possibilities. So there I would advise you to really focus. So I don't know, I just choose a point in the room where I can just look and focus and not be distracted and just really listen clearly to it. And the fourth one was, like I told you before, that they will just say something and you need the right answer. And like I told you before, I'm more like a listening and speaking type. So for me, I didn't really need to think about it. I was just like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's how I kind of to make this exercise. So yeah, in my case, I'm more kind of a speaking and listening type in Japanese. So this was not that hard for me. But like I said, I really need to work on my kanji skills and reading. Anyway, the last part was where you have a long dialogue. That was question part 5. And there you needed to have a dialogue between like two persons. They're talking about where they want to go. Usually you have some, for example, some park, and then you have some parts of this park, like Higashi going, Minami going, something like this. So there I would advise you to take memos next to answer possibilities. So for example, they would say, at this part you can see sakura, or at this part you can see koi fishes, stuff like this. So I would advise you to write down what you can see at those parts, because in the text they will usually also later talk about where they want to go or what they like and so on. So they will not use the name that is written as an answer possibility, just kind of describe, I want to see sakura trees. But by having those notes, sakura trees, this part, so it's this part. And then they will ask you, okay, where do they want to go? And that was pretty helpful for me. So yeah, that was about the JLPT exam. Then it's finished. They will count everything, get your stuff back, and then you just go home. Like I told you in the beginning, we needed there from 12:50 to I think 4:55. So it's kind of a long time you're there. So I would advise you to take food with you, or some water. Yeah. If you still have questions to the JLPT, just write it down in the comments. In Germany, we say press some thumbs, so please press some thumbs so I pass this JLPT exam. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, the first and the last part, the listening part and the general understanding, pretty easy for me to be honest, but like the reading part was like catastrophic. But anyway, I mean, that's how it went. It's okay how it went, and I know what I have to work on the next time. Yeah, maybe I will do some challenge out of it. I learn every kanji from Japanese school or something. Like learn every Joyo kanji in 30 days or something. I will think of some challenge and we can maybe do it together. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Oh, no,